Brandon AIYUK sent a direct message to Adam Peters and Dan Quinn saying he's the final piece Washington needs. But in a minute, I'll break down why signing him right now could be the worst mistake of the offseason, and why the real opponent here isn't even another team. Meanwhile, there's an actual receiver knocking on Ashburn's door. Stefon Diggs, a Maryland native, already told Fox 5 that playing back home would be surreal, and per ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, at least 5 teams are calling him right now, so I'll tell you why every day Washington waits could cost them this signing for good. And to close things out, something nobody saw coming 2 days before training camp opens. The Commanders just fired tight ends coach Ben STEELE over something that has nothing to do with football, and Dan Quinn has to announce his replacement tomorrow, right as the entire roster reports to Ashburn. Burgundy and gold, DMV, let's get into it, raise hail. Alright, let's do this one right, because the Brandon AIYUK situation has been dragging on for over a year now, and I think a lot of people lost track of where this actually stands. So let's start from the ground up, nice and calm, and I'll give you my unfiltered take after. Here's the base situation. AIYUK hasn't played a football game since October 2024, when he tore his ACL and his meniscus against the Chiefs. That was the same year he signed a 4-year, $120 million extension with San Francisco, after a whole saga that nearly sent him to Cleveland, to Pittsburgh, you name it, before he finally worked things out with the Niners. So this friction with San Francisco isn't new, it goes way back. But what happened after the injury is what really broke the relationship. The Athletic reported, and ESPN and CBS Sports independently confirmed this afterward, that AIYUK chose to rehab his knee away from the team facility. He didn't stay in consistent contact with San Francisco's medical staff during that process. And in the world of NFL contracts, that's not a small detail, bro. That's a breach. Let's get into the specific mechanism, because this is where people get lost. AIYUK's contract had a guarantee clause that kicked in on April 1st, an option bonus worth almost $25 million for 2026. The Niners, back in July of last year, voided that guarantee, citing that AIYUK hadn't met the requirements of the deal, basically the rehab obligations. Kyle Shanahan confirmed that himself at a press conference, and San Francisco's head coach was pretty direct with the little he did say. "Never in my career have I seen something like that. It was unusual," Shanahan said without getting into more detail. When a coach with Shanahan's track record calls a contract situation unusual, something strange is going on behind closed doors. And that's where the most revealing part of this whole thing comes in, for me. Instead of taking the logical path, which was applying for reinstatement as soon as possible, playing out the rest of the deal somewhere else, proving the knee was fine, AIYUK chose something completely different. He started posting videos on Instagram, stories, subtweets, direct shots at the organization. He even tagged the players' union asking, quote, for a fresh set of eyes on this case because the ones on it right now are sleeping on the job. That's the behavior of somebody who decided to fight this thing in public instead of solving the problem fast, bro. And public wars almost never end well for the player who starts them. The more videos he posts, the further he drifts from the place where this actually gets won, which is the football field and a clean medical file, not an Instagram story with a soundtrack. Now, the real obstacle, the actual thing standing between this and an AIYUK jersey in Ashburn, he's still under contract with San Francisco through 2028. He's still on the reserve, left squad list, which is basically an administrative limbo where the player doesn't count against the roster or the cap, but also can't sign with anybody else. To get out of that, AIYUK has to formally apply for reinstatement with the league. The league has to grant it. And only then would San Francisco actually have to decide whether to let him practice, risking owing him millions again if he gets hurt on their watch, or just cut him loose. Adam Schefter put it plainly this week. Only Brandon AIYUK can force that issue, the ESPN insider said. And as of now, by every report out there, AIYUK hasn't started that process. Zero paperwork filed, just videos. And here's my honest opinion, no sugarcoating it. Brandon AIYUK is being the worst lawyer for his own case. He's got a serious injury, he's got a real talent reputation. Remember, second team All-Pro in 2023, 1,342 receiving yards, and instead of letting the football speak, he decided to turn himself into social media content. Jeremy Fowler said it without holding back a few weeks ago, that AIYUK keeps, quote, nuking his own job prospects, and added that several teams he's talked to are giving AIYUK the benefit of the doubt reluctantly, not because they fully trust him. That's a huge deal, fam. Because that text message AIYUK sent last Friday, the one where he says Adam Peters and Dan Quinn quietly put together a squad and that he's the final piece that's going to swing the odds in Washington's favor, sounds beautiful to us as fans. But the reality of high-level football is that no general manager, especially not one as methodical as Adam Peters, is going to build a contingency plan around a player who hasn't even started the paperwork to become eligible. And who's the silent rival here? It's not another team competing directly for AIYUK, it's something worse. It's the open market itself. The day San Francisco decides to cut him loose, any team in the league can call. There's no clause guaranteeing Washington exclusivity. Yes, AIYUK played with Jaden Daniels at Arizona State. Yes, Adam Peters comes from the Niners organization and knows this player inside and out. Yes, there's a real connection there, but connection isn't the same as a signed deal. If AIYUK keeps taking shots at the very quarterback he supposedly wants to help, and yes, there were reports of him throwing jabs at Jaden Daniels online, which honestly feels like a dumb move if he actually wants Washington to sign him. He can end up scaring off the one franchise that's still looking at him with any real interest. My final take on this, I wouldn't build any receiver plan for 2026 around Brandon AIYUK. Not as a starter, not as a dated plan B. If at some point this season, say around the October trade deadline, San Francisco decides to just cut ties and AIYUK finally files the paperwork, then sure, Washington can move fast because Peters already knows the situation from the inside. But counting on that right now, at the very start of camp, that's just wishful thinking. And I'll be honest about something that's hard for me to admit as a fan. Part of me still wants this to work out. I saw what AIYUK did in 2023 with room to run, and that fan part of me still dreams about seeing him next to Terry and Jaden. But when I take the jersey off for 2 minutes and look at this with a clear head, I can't ignore the pattern. Every single time AIYUK had a chance to fix something with actual action, he chose the noise instead. That's not just my gut feeling, that's what actual executives told Fowler directly, and that's where my fan heart and my analyst brain don't agree, and I'm siding with the brain on this one, what the Commanders should actually be doing, and this is what I want to focus on in the next story, is solving the receiver problem with options that are available today. Alright, exhale, because after the AIYUK soap opera, I needed to talk about something with less noise and more actual football substance, and that's Stefon Diggs. This situation is a lot simpler to understand, even if it's just as interesting. Diggs is a free agent. He's coming off a solid season with the Patriots where, even while playing through a surgically repaired knee, he finished with 85 catches, 1,013 yards, and 4 touchdowns as the WR1. And on top of that, he made his first Super Bowl. At 32 years old, with all that recent production, you'd think he'd already be signed somewhere, but he's not. And the reason he's still available, according to reporters covering the league closely, is a mix of the legal uncertainty he was carrying, which, important to say, he's now been cleared of both legally and by the NFL itself, and the fact that teams are still calculating how level football is left in the legs of a receiver turning 33 in November. What makes this story juicy for us as Washington fans is this. Diggs was born and raised in Maryland. Played his college ball at the University of Maryland, half an hour from Landover, and in an interview with Fox 5 this offseason, when asked directly if he could see himself playing for his hometown team, he didn't hesitate. 100%, Diggs answered, and added it would be, quote, a thing if it actually happened. That's not a throwaway comment. When a player with Diggs' competitive profile, and let's be honest, a guy with a reputation for needing attention and target volume to perform at his best, starts talking publicly about accepting a secondary role, you pay attention. And that's exactly what's happening. According to ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, people close to Diggs are telling reporters that the receiver is willing to accept being a WR2 behind a good young quarterback. Fowler's exact words. Really good number 2 receiver for a top quarterback, and Washington is intriguing to him. In the context of the Commanders, that points straight at Jaden Daniels. Terry McLaurin remains the undisputed WR1 of this team, and he's going to keep being that as long as he keeps playing the way he plays. But behind him, there are more questions than answers. Diami Brown, Treylon Burks, Luke McCaffrey, Van Jefferson, rookie Antonio Williams, who's got people excited but hasn't played a single NFL down yet. That's the gap gap Diggs in theory comes in to fill. Now, the tactical and financial detail most people aren't looking at closely enough. According to ESPN reporting, Washington has a clear pattern under Adam Peters of signing players over 30 to 1-year deals. No long-term commitment, no risk of a bloated cap hit in 2027 or 2028. That makes Diggs fit perfectly into this front office's business model, and there's a competitive detail raising the urgency here. There are reports that at least 5 teams are actively monitoring Diggs right now. 5. That means every week that passes without Washington making a move is a week the market could close for good. There's a tactical layer worth adding here too, because this isn't just a name and resume story. David Blau, as a first-time offensive coordinator, is going to need receivers who understand intermediate route depth without forcing the scheme to get simpler. Diggs, even at 32, is still one of the best in the league at reading soft zones against too high coverages, the kind of read that separates a receiver with real mileage from one who's still learning the playbook. That takes pressure off Jaden Daniels having to force the first read to McLaurin on every single snap, which was honestly one of the biggest problems with this offense when the number 2 receiver was a mystery week to week. My personal take here, and this one I feel pretty strongly about: sign Diggs now. I genuinely don't understand what the front office is waiting for. Yes, he's 32. Yes, Diggs' game depends heavily on separation and precise route running, the kind of stuff that starts declining with age before raw speed does. But give me a proven wide receiver with real hunger to play at home next to a quarterback who's just starting to hit his ceiling, overbetting the whole season on the hope that a third-round rookie or a receiver who's never fully settled into the league like Treylon Burks suddenly breaks out in 2026. The Diggs risk is a known, manageable one. The risk of doing nothing is a lot bigger. It's the risk of Jaden Daniels walking into the regular season without a real WR2, running on hope instead of certainty. And I'll be honest about my own bias here, because it would be easy to sell you this as purely cold analysis when it isn't entirely. I grew up watching Diggs torch the Commanders with the Bills and the Vikings, and I always thought, man, I wish he played for us. So when I hear a guy from Maryland, raised half an hour from Landover, say on camera that yeah, he thought about it, that it would be a thing if it happened, part of me reacts as a fan before I react as an analyst. I own that, but even stripping out the emotional flavor, the numbers, and the actual need at the position still point the same direction. The one honest doubt I've got here, bro, and I'm sharing it because I don't want to just sell you optimism, is the locker room piece. Diggs has had known friction with quarterbacks and teammates when he feels like he's not getting enough targets. If Washington brings him in and David Blau doesn't manage to integrate him with a clear role from week 1, this can turn into a headache fast. But honestly, with the production he brings, the hometown connection, and 5 teams already knocking, I'd rather manage that risk 1,000 times over than sit on my hands and watch another NFC team scoop up Diggs to use against us later in the season. And to close it out, something completely different, something that has nothing to do with what happens on the field, but that shakes up the team at just about the worst possible moment. Ben STEELE, the Commanders' tight ends coach, was fired this Monday, just 2 days before training camp opens. The story, in short, on June 7th, STEELE was pulled over in Loudoun County, Virginia, exactly where the Commanders train, on suspicion of driving while intoxicated. According to Virginia court records, he was stopped for a minor traffic violation, changing lanes without properly signaling, and it escalated from there into more serious charges: driving while intoxicated and obstruction, resisting without force, after refusing a blood or breath test on the scene. All 3 charges are Class 1 misdemeanors under Virginia law. He was released on his own recognizance that same day. What makes this story even stranger is how the team handled it. The Commanders initially placed STEELE on leave, according to sources close to the team, and reported the incident to the league, but they said nothing publicly for over a month. Only this Monday, with a pretty dry post on their official X account, did the organization announce they were parting ways with STEELE, adding they wouldn't have further comment. And here's the detail that caught my attention. Before the statement even went live, the team had already scrubbed STEELE's bio from their official website. For anyone who understands how NFL public relations actually works, that's a sign the decision was made a while ago and they were just waiting for the right moment. Wes Welker, an offensive assistant on the staff, had been covering STEELE's responsibilities since he was placed on leave, including the final OTA practices. And per the team, Dan Quinn is set to announce STEELE's replacement tomorrow, Tuesday, right as camp opens. That means Washington's tight ends, with Chig Okonkwo as the most important piece of that group now that the Deebo Samuel receiving experiment is over. are heading into the most important preseason of the year with a brand new position coach learning names and schemes on the fly. My take here is simple, and it's not really up for debate. The organization did the right thing by reporting this to the league and parting ways with STEELE. There's no ethical gray area on that. Driving intoxicated is serious. Doesn't matter if you're the tight ends coach or the owner of the team. What does bother me is the timing. A full month of silence, only to drop the news literally the day before the entire roster reports to Ashburn. That, fam, smells like an organization calculating the exact moment to minimize media impact, betting that real football news, injuries, first practices, who's winning what job, drowns this out in 24 hours. And honestly, as a cold communication strategy, I get it completely. I can even see the PR logic in it. But as a fan who follows this franchise closely, I would have liked to hear about this the same day as the arrest, not a month later, with the coach's bio already wiped off the website before the statement even dropped. The trust between an organization and its fan base gets built on little details like that, not just on wins on Sundays. And there's something else about this story that stuck with me, so I'll just say it straight. If this happened to a starting player instead of a position coach lower on the depth chart, the coverage would have been 10 times bigger, and we probably wouldn't have waited a month to hear about it. I'm not saying the organization buried this out of any bad intent towards STEELE specifically. I think they just calculated that an offensive assistant draws fewer uncomfortable questions than a star would. But as a fan, I'd want the same level of transparency no matter who's involved, because accountability shouldn't depend on how bright the name shines on the jersey or on the whiteboard. And that's a wrap for today. Look, all three stories today really come down to the same question. Who's going to stand next to Terry McLaurin, and who's going to surround Jaden Daniels when the real season kicks off? AIYUK is still a fantasy tied to paperwork that hasn't even been filed. DIGGS is a reality available right now, with 5 teams knocking on the door, waiting on Adam Peters to make the call. And in the middle of it, the organization had to deal with a problem that has nothing to do with the field, at the worst possible week for it. This franchise has got a roster hungry to compete, a quarterback who hasn't hit his ceiling yet, and a front office that, for better or worse, moves with method. I'm still hoping Peters pulls the trigger on DIGGS before that window closes. Tell me down in the comments. Would you sign DIGGS right now, or would you wait to see if AIYUK gets his paperwork sorted out? I want to read every single one. See y'all in the next one. Raise hail always.